I'm Craig Cobbin from Geo-political Futures. Do you wonder why there are so many big changes going on recently in the world, from pandemics, high inflation, high energy prices, riots in France, Brexit, and the election of Donald Trump, to the invasion of Ukraine and China firing missiles over Taiwan into Japanese waters, causing Japan to double its defense budget? Today, we're going to unwrap what is behind the instability and try to predict what could be next. Events over the last decade show we have passed through an important change in the global balance of power, centered around 2014 roughly. This was a gradual change from starting around 2008 to 2022, from being a unipolar world with the United States as the only unchallenged superpower, back to bipolarity as Chinese Communist Party, mainland China, took advantage of US sea lane security and markets to become a great economic power. We have moved from a post-Cold War world of plenty, driven by cheap energy and truly globalized free trade, into a new kind of Cold War with geostrategic insecurity, slowly reducing globalization away from dangerous, aggressive despots like Russia and China as they jointly attempt to overturn the rules-based order that made globalization possible. And this was the first time it's ever happened in history, where every country in the world could trade with every other country in the world safely. We are now seeing trade flows slowly revert away from the despots. Only a month after Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time in 2022, trade flows from the liberal democracies with Russia was sharply reduced. But China, Iran and India took up the slack, creating Cold War II era of more divided trade blocs. It's not yet the same as Cold War I, but give it time. This is a slow process, but it is now likely irreversible as the Chinese Communist Party fires missiles over Taiwan and flies military jets into Taiwanese and Japanese waters almost daily. Japan has doubled its military spending. That is a major, major change for the third biggest economy. No matter how much economists complain, the reality is security is a zero-sum game. You have it or you don't. As the China challenges the US and their allies in the Pacific, the Liberal Democratic Alliance is gradually strengthened as the democracies share core security interests in preventing a Chinese hegemony in the Asia Pacific. The clash of core security interests between the two great powers has already seen the US cut off China from advanced technology that can be used in weapons. The despots are doubling down, and so will the United States. Only Wall Street is resisting fast decoupling. Even they, with no values beyond profit, will start to build factories in Mexico and Vietnam because China and the CCP incompetence has caused a terrible demographic decline. That means in a decade, labour costs in China will be very expensive. In some categories, Mexican labour is already cheaper, and there are less energy and security risks in Texas than despotic China. The Chinese Communist Party is starting to harass Western businesses in China, and this is getting worse. Liberal democracies like Holland, which makes cutting-edge semiconductor tooling, have backed the US ban on China. Taiwan is buying record military supplies from the US and is restarting military training as the threats of invasion ramps up. Tensions will likely gradually worsen in the region, with some ups and downs along the way for several reasons. No leader, either in China or America, can stop this deterioration because security always trumps economics. You cannot trade securely if you don't have security. So security and power is a zero-sum game, whether we like it or not, as we have seen in Europe as the Russian trade was cut off during the war. Core security interests are absolute. You cannot do business without trust or security. The CCP and Russia have proved again and again since 2014 they cannot be trusted to honour treaties or international law. The CCP broke Hong Kong's Two Systems International Treaty in 2020 and broke international law building military base islands in international waters, nearly 1,000 miles from China. The CCP threatened Filipino fishing boats routinely and stupidly attempted crude economic coercion against the Australian government. Australia resisted, and the CCP only hurt their own economy, now in trouble due to mismanagement. For those who do not want to believe that 2014 that the world had changed, an escalating proxy war in Ukraine broke out in 2022. As a result, the democracies decoupled from Russia in only a month. The CCP China supports Russia in their bid to destroy the liberal world order. So decoupling has been more slowly with the CCP, also driven by long-term economic and democratic mistakes made in China. The US and China are far bigger economic and military powers than any other rivals. That is why it's really a bipolar world rather than what some people are saying, a multipolar world. The size of the Russian economy, for example, is not much bigger than Australia's. And Germany and Japan, the two next biggest economies in the world, don't have a military, a great power military. Their militaries are quite small compared to Russia or China. Russia and India have nuclear weapons, but their economies are too small to be a great power. Russia is struggling to even pacify Ukraine on its land border. So that shows that it's no longer a great power like it was in the Soviet days. What has caused inflation? Well, it's a combination of increase in energy costs caused by the move to renewables, and in the globalized era, all the parts are manufactured and shipped between different manufacturing hubs in Asia and China and whatnot. So every time a part's moved, it takes energy. There's an energy component. So everything's going to go up and it's going to keep going up. It's also driven by the fact that the baby boomers are retiring in the West. So there's less labour available in the West, which is increasing costs as well. So that's a bit of an outline of why we've got all this instability. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the way that the world has carried it out, and it's not over. We're only seeing the beginnings of it. So see you next time.